Hello and welcome everyone joining us on this session today. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending upon what location you have joined us from. Our topic for today's discussion is maintenance of spare parts with data quality using MDO. My name is Sahil Naqvi and I head the product alliances with Prospecta. Talking about Prospecta, we started off our journey in 2002 from Sydney, Australia, with our locations now in India and US. Uh, Our offerings are in the space of data management and safety compliance. The data management application called Master Data Online, MDO, is SAP certified and available on the SAP App Center. The safety or SHE compliance management is WorkSafe Online or WSO. What we are covering in today's session. So we will be covering how MDO can help manage spare part maintenance in an effective and efficient way. We'll be talking about the features of the MDO application, which can help in that process of managing new spare parts. And importantly, we'll be also covering the topic of how we standardize and optimize existing spare parts within the business inventory. Now, the key challenges we try to resolve using MDO for spare part management, that includes the data deduplication. That's one of the key challenges. Data inconsistencies, getting to the right spare when you have to search for it, filling up missing information about spares and items. And all of this, which combined together has a direct impact on the company's spend and can lead to a loss of revenue. So what exactly is MDO and how can MDO help? So MDO is a web-based application, which is a data governance and data quality management tool. MDO is designed for business users, allowing them to collaborate between different business owners for different master data management processes. MDO has a role-based access with multilingual user interface, an intuitive user interface for business users to use the application, and also the focus is on the businesses to manage the data management platform completely. Now, through this workflow engine, the business rule engine, and the content dictionary of MDO, along with the on-screen validations, what we are trying to get, or what we are trying to generate as an output, is trustworthy data going into the ERP with the highest level of data quality as per the defined business rules, which can be used for all ERP transactions. Now, what comes out of the box with MDO are different masters that you see on the top, which includes the suppliers, customers, plant maintenance, which has the entire suite of functional locations, equipment, bill of material, maintenance plan, task list, all of that within the MDO application. Materials, which includes the spare parts, finished goods, raw materials, different material types that can be managed here, finance and finished goods. Then the HR masters, and MDO also allows to configure or set up custom objects within the framework. Now, MDO has a unique functionality of passive governance management apart from the active governance. So active governance is, first of all, the setup where MDO becomes the front-end tool for all business validations to take place. All the rules that we have set up will be applied at the time of data entry, and different contributors or approvers can approve that request, which goes through as a trustworthy data into the source system or the target system. In the passive governance mode, the data entry can happen in a different system. The MDO can pull this data from multiple different sources. MDO can be a validation engine running behind and making sure that, first of all, discrepancies of data is identified, and that can be assigned to different business owners to get rid of and send it back to the target system with as a trustworthy data on which transactions can be made. Now, what is unique about MDO? So we have a predefined governance rules for all these different masters that comes out of the box. Now, a very intuitive data management framework. Businesses can configure the entire application without any kind of code change. It's all through configurations which are easy to manage. Intelligent collaboration between different business owners. So workflows, capabilities that can trigger workflows based upon a defined value or a comparative value between two fields, based upon hierarchies selected. All that can happen as a collaboration platform in our workflow engine. The other key differentiators are things like the data health assessment. So this can be used for assessing the data quality health as a start of the cleansing or standardization project. Then we have the data quality workbench for the passive governance rules. Here, actions can be assigned to business owners depending upon what businesses or what field set they own. Again, they can correct that within the MDO UI, or they can correct that using an offline mode of Excel called Excel Connect in MDO. Then MDO also has an API engine for external checks. This can be through external catalogs that we can refer to for enrichment or for validation of information. Within MDO, we have a rich content dictionary. So this is both in terms of the attributes or characteristics of a particular noun, which can be visualized as an item, and also a gold dictionary for all the standardized spare parts cleansed and enriched, which can be referred to during the enrichment process or the enhancement process. So MDO also has certified integrators for systems like SAP and Salesforce. They can be used off the shelf when we are setting up integration with these target systems. I will come directly into the MDO for spare parts. We'll focus on this as our subject in today's discussion. So what standards we use when it comes to spare part standardization? So these standards are UNSPSC classification standards with EOTD, which is the ECMA Open Technical Directory. Why we use them, or why MDO standardization is based upon these standards, is they are widely accepted as industry standards, are very extensive in that covers most of the items, and also keep getting updated regularly. So what we do, we classify spare parts using these using the segment, family, class, and commodity level classification of UNSPSC, along with the business function. So helping to map the function which is being performed with respect to that commodity. So in the next example, what we'll talk about, or we'll explain, is how MDO maps the material group at the UNSPSC commodity class level, and each of these material groups can in turn have one or more than one noun associated with that. And similarly, each noun can have one or more than one modifier, which can be visualized as a type of that item. And then based upon the combination of noun and modifier, different set of characteristics or attributes will be maintained. MDO content dictionary will provide possible values for each of these attributes as well. Now, in terms of executing a project for spare part maintenance, these are our broad level steps or stages of the project. We'll start off with a scoping or understanding of what are the sources of spare part to be synced into MDO, the methodology of how we are syncing that data. And the initial level, we will be performing a data health assessment on all those spares. There's some exclusion rules. These exclusion rules are the deduplication or duplication check to put it this way. They identify what are the upfront duplicates in the system. They can be identified within this without the standardization process or before the standardization process at the start of it. Then using the MDO tool, we will classify all of these spare parts using the UNSPSC classification standards. This can be a couple of weeks job because it will involve both the automation through the tool and also the expertise of data experts to cross-verify the assignment. Now, the other two steps that you see can run in parallel. One being the MDO data management or data governance model, with setting up the roles and setting up the workflows for different users to request a new master record through MDO, who should be approving what set of data, where is good for approval, and finally into the ERP system. And then the other thing that we can keep running in parallel is the whole enrichment of existing records based upon UNSPSC standards. This can be a combination of both the passive governance rules that we set up in MDO and wherever required, reference to our content dictionary. And of course, we'll have experts to, in case there is further expertise required on enriching that data. And from a governance flow perspective, this is a typical example where a requester, an MRO requester, would request, and all these validations in terms of short and long description, the PO text description would happen upfront. So at the time of generating the request, including the deduplication, what are the potential duplicates based upon this request, any other business validations that is required would happen at the start of the request itself, which will trigger a workflow or goes to approval to all these business owners. Now, from an MDO perspective, the ownership can be defined at a field level. So, which means that we can configure and set up that which business function owns which set of fields, and be it a creation process or be it a change process, it will go through an approval or a validation through that business function before it goes further in the workflow within MDO, or whether it integrates with the ERP system. So this can be a sequential, this can be a parallel validation happening through all these business functions. And finally, what we get is in the ERP system is trustworthy data which can be used for all ERP transactions. Now, to add more visualization to the whole concept of noun modifiers in MDO, so what we'll start off with is advanced searching functionality in MDO, and then we can also search whether there is any description with those keywords that we are trying to request. If we are sure that this item is not in the inventory, we need to create new. All that the user has to do is type in what they are requesting for. What is the item? So they type in, for example, in this case, bearing, and all the possible modifiers of bearing would list down, and they can choose from, which becomes a combination of noun and modifier. Now, based upon this noun and modifier, the list of attributes would populate. Now, these attributes would have some of these attributes as mandatory. You need to know them before you request a new spare part. Some of them can be non-mandatory, which is an additional information about that item while we are requesting it. Some of them can have associated unit of measure. So the whole list of what values you can choose from would appear here. And what MDO does is it generates the short and long description automatically based upon this selection. So there's no manual typing of either the short description, long description, PO text in MDO. It'll all be generated through these selections, which can also be mapped to the SAP classification structure. These attributes can be the characteristic values when it integrates into the SAP system. Now, what may look like a tedious job to maintain is actually just uh, through easy configurations in MDO. So we're just covering the part where how we define these nouns and how we define each of these attributes and its values in MDO. So this example, we're showing the list of all the characteristics, and we define whether this is a pick list type or a text area type or whatever type that attribute is, whether it should be used in the short description, whether it shouldn't be, whether it has an UAM, unit of measure, associated with that or not, whether any prefixes are required, and also map that to the UNSPSC code. Now, as I said, the MDO also is multilingual, so we can maintain the attribute translation in multiple different languages. So when we generate descriptions in MDO, it can be generated in multiple languages in one go. Now, in both in the active and passive governance mode, we would need the exclusion rules, or in a layman's term, these are the deduplication checks in MDO to find out whether there are potential duplicates in that for that item in the system or not. We can also set up rules when we are creating a new item. If there are 25% of possibility of a duplicate, simply allow that user, or if there is a 25 to 50% possibility of duplicate, show them as a warning. Anything above that, give them a hard stop, show them the list of potential duplicates like you see here. And also in the passive governance mode, the business owners get an option of manually merging, or we can set up a transformation rule to auto merge and make one golden record out of all the potential duplicates showing up. Now on this process, the other activity that we will keep doing in parallel is the whole enrichment side of things. So we will refer to the gold dictionary of spare parts that we have maintained. If we can map the manufacturer part number to it, then we instantly get all the characteristics, all the enriched values for that item. We can incorporate that. If not, we can refer to manufacturer's website or their catalogs and update that information. If it's a more generic item, it would need more expertise to put in more information into that item details. We can at times find more information in the purchase order text that we receive initially, and then we can also make use of the material bulk load functionality for mass approval by the business. So what I mean by that is, this is how typically the whole process would work. So we will keep cleansing, standardizing the items and submitting it within MDO, which will go to the business approvers who own that category of classification of items. They can review that. If there is something to be corrected, they can send it back for correction, which our team can further update and send back. And once this is approved, is when it integrates into the ERP system as cleansed and standardized item. Now, we have been talking about the passive governance for spare parts. One question that comes into mind: in what scenarios we will be needing that? When do we need to have the passive governance rule engine active for spares? So the very first scenario is the business rules might change over time. We set up MDO with some defined rules, and over the period there are new business rules that gets defined. We want to run the entire set against these new business rules and see how many of them are in compliance and how many have some discrepancy, and who should be correcting that based upon the business ownership. The second scenario is where you have mergers, you have acquisitions, you suddenly get a lot of master data which needs to be all into one ERP system. Then we can have these this data getting validated against the defined business rules, which can run in the background. It doesn't need to be just the front end tool. And the third scenario, of course, is which we talked about, where MDO is not the front end tool, and the initial data entry is happening in some other application, like, for example, the vendors getting created, or the customers getting created could be some other tool where data entry is happening, and an MDO can fetch information, fetch this data from those systems, have all those deduplication and data validations running, API, external API checks like through DNB, for example, and cross-verifying that data before sending it back to the target system. Now, what are the kind of rules that we can set up? So these are different, some of the examples here, whether my information is complete, whether it's accurate, consistent, it's valid, and what the end user can do or the person who is the owner of that data can do within the MDO UI. They can correct that missing pieces of data quality, or they can make use of the Excel Connect functionality of MDO. So that is like an Excel interface of the whole application with all these different business validations, which can have an offline mode. Even if they're on a flight, they're not connected to MDO, they can keep correcting that information, and all the business validations would happen, and they can know how much of that data has got corrected and how much needs to be worked on. Now, with that, what I will jump into is give you a better perspective of the MDO application, how MDO helps in the whole spare part management. We start off with the active governance mode, where MDO is the front-end tool, how a new request is requested from MDO. There are direct links for this requester to, and they also have advanced functionalities to search an item. It can be through a keyword search or a combination of multiple different fields. Now, if this item is found within the master records of spare parts, then the user can have an option of extending it to their own plant. So they know that doesn't need to be treated as a separate item. It just requires extension to their own plant. So that's the example, that one of the scenarios that MDO. So this can trigger a workflow, goes to approval to the plant approvers of the target plant, and they can validate the information. In this case, for example, the basic data would not be editable, but that remains the same during the extension process. It's only the plant level information that is being put in, and it can have a workflow. And then finally, what you see is this record getting extended to more than one plant through MDO. The other scenario would be when a user searches for a particular item, and the item is not found, even with all the keywords and even with the advanced searching functionality. So this allows to kind of search an item using single or more than one variants. We can set it up and save these search variants, which can even include the nouns that we are looking for, material groups, including the plant. And if this item is not found, is when the user will go in and create a new request for MRO or spare part. So MDO doesn't allow the short and long description to be entered. So the user will be searching one more time based upon the standardized description. If the item is not found, all they will do is select the particular noun, what they're creating, and the system is suggesting all the possible values for each of these attributes. We can have dependencies set up within this attribute list. What it means is based upon a selection of a particular value within an attribute, other attributes can become mandatory or hidden or can get filtered value. And what we get is a short and long description generated from MDO. And if there are potential duplicates within the system, then the MDO application will prompt the user that there are duplicates. You can cross-verify and cross-check. And that's the form of the actual creation form now for the requester. What you see is an easy to fill up form with a lot of default values and fields getting pre-populated based upon hierarchies like plant or sometimes storage locations. Simpler combination of fields for the requester, which the requester may or may not own. It completely depends upon what you expect the requester to know at the time of initiating a new spare part request. Now this will trigger a workflow when the requester submits that, and it goes to the defined approvers or the business functions that has to approve this spare part request before it integrates into the ERP system. So at this point, the next level of approval, which can be sequential, which can be parallel approval, they will receive an email that you have an action to perform, and along with a direct link to this record, an auto-generated email from MDO. They'll also receive a push notification on the mobile app and also a notification section in MDO that signifies there is some action for them to be performed. As a requester, one can always look at what is the status of my request, who has approved it, where is it pending. Now, as an approver, the whole layout, the whole form can look very different because they own different set of data. They will still see the details of that item, but a lot of that would be in a read-only mode unless they own that set of information. The other aspect where MDO can be helpful in reducing the effort of assigning a spare part to an equipment BOM directly. So if we have equipment master also maintained in MDO, we can assign which equipment the spare part is being requested for and where it will be used, and then we can include that information there. Now, the workflow engine can be dynamic. So since we have added the information of an equipment BOM to be updated, we have one more approval dynamically added into the workflow. So this approver is approving this inclusion there, and the whole when it comes to after the integration, this equipment will be updated with the spare part added to the bill of material. Now, similarly, the other things that we can do from MDO, so is from a task list perspective or action list perspective, we can claim a request which goes away from the task list of all of the users which have received it or who are in the same workflow process. They can also forward that request to somebody else and put it as a draft. So put in their set of data, save it as a draft, and then forward it. So it becomes a collaboration within the same business functions. So you see this particular business function is putting in plant level information for this request. As and when we are filling up a value, certain other fields are getting auto-populated. The warehouse or the logistics person can put in information about how the item will be stored, in which warehouse, storage type, and associated fields for it. So instead of one user putting in all the information, it's bifurcating or dividing it into different approvers or business functions putting in their set of data, and all the field level validations happening at the time of data entry itself. Now, one more aspect of reducing the effort of using the spare part is when we want to create info records or source list for the spare part. So that can be again be assigned from MDO by the right business function. If we have the vendor information available within MDO, we can define that. So we'll come on that section. We will configure or set up the info records piece for it. There we go. So we have the create info record. You say yes, if you want to create an info record for the spare part for which vendor we are buying it from, price, currency, those details. And again, the same concept applies. A dynamic workflow which can have one more level of approval. Since we have selected the info records and source list to be added for the spare part, you can have one more approver approving that. And they can view the entire contract information, source list information, the info record information from it. There we go. Right, so this workflow can vary from business to business. It's all through configuration, how we set it up, what are the steps that we need while creating a new spare part. Would that change during a change process? It can again be based upon what fields are changed. It can go into only those approvers which need to see that change, and who are the set of approvers required when it comes to extension. When all of this approvals and collaboration is completed, the integration would happen in the background with the target ERP system. Let's take the example of SAP in this case, where this item is now created with all these details what we have put in, and we can also map the class and characteristics with the classification section of SAP here. So this was the example of how MDO can be the front-end tool for a single record, create, change, extend, or flag for deletion that can be maintained from MDO. We'll also have a mass processing tool in MDO, which can have the mass creation, mass extension, and mass change, which we'll talk about. It's just before that, on the passive governance piece of MDO, how we define these business rules for the spare parts, which can be conditional, if you want to run it only on some set of data. So this again can be the scenario where there's new data added to the database, and you want to conditionally run it, or we run it for all of them, or only for the recently modified ones. You can select the filter criteria on which these rules should run. So what we get when we run this schema is an output in terms of how many records have successfully or 100% score of data quality score, how many have lesser than 100%. There's some discrepancy that needs to be worked on. You can assign the action based upon what fields need to be updated or corrected through this engine. They will receive an action to be performed of making corrections within the MDO system. Now they can do those corrections on the MDO UI, and they can also download the entire thing, as we talked about the Excel Connect functionality. So this is an Excel skin of MDO. You can visualize that database, and all these business validations that we were talking about, that we have set it up, would come into effect here. Now, this can be a completely offline mode. You can validate and get to know how many have passed successfully, how many still need some kind of correction. And then once we are connected again, we can upload that back into the MDO server. You can see the success now for more items showing up. So how we are defining these business rules, and we'll talk about that. Just before that, we can also look at the data insight piece of MDO. So this is a more time space view of whether my data quality is increasing or deteriorating, or with a new set of information updated or a new business rule added, has it been going down, or has been so you can visualize it based upon the percentage of the data quality score of each of these set of data, and see if how am I doing in terms of the data quality. Now, you can split it. Now, this can again have a direct access to update that set of data to bring the data quality score up. Now, the other aspect of MDO is that deduplication aspect, where the business owners can run a deduplication check with new records added. If there are potential duplicates, they can identify which one is my master record. They can choose that one. They have an option of collating or putting the right information for this master record through all the potential duplicates that have been identified, and make one item as a complete item with all the right set of data. See, the other one can be put flag for deletion for, or whenever such schemas are run, they will be excluded from those rules. Now, that is about the single record maintenance and creation through MDO. And as we talked about, we also have a mass creation or a mass management process, which the users can download their template from their profile. And just like the single record maintenance, we can have multiple records created from MDO with all those default values, dependencies, and the same set of taxonomy rules. If I select a particular noun, different set of attributes will show up with different functionality, with different characteristics of what is mandatory and what is not. And the description gets generated based upon the values selected for each of these attributes. So like that, we can have plant information and all the different hierarchy information added within this Excel. And once we are validating it, so having just an Excel interface would not have provided the option of validating it against all the business rules. But with MDO, if you're validating it at the time of upload itself, the system is providing what are the discrepancies in the data set that we are uploading there. It could be straightforward ones, for example, a mandatory field not being filled up, or a dependency not being in place, or even a potential duplicate which you are finding in the single record creation, which could also happen in the case of mass upload. So once the user who's requesting this mass creation corrects all of that information, it can trigger a workflow, goes to set of approvers for approval before the record. All these records can get updated in SAP. When it comes to approval, this approval can be a mass approval. They can have a view of all the items within the MDO UI. They can go into each of these individual sections, like the classification data, the plan data, storage, or the grid information, which is the purchase text or basic data text, things like that. Or the user also has an option of downloading this information again into an Excel Connect functionality, which will give them the entire view in the Excel interface. And depending upon what permissions they have, they can either modify this information or add more items to it before that gets approved. So the same concept applies here. They can validate this information. If everything fine with that, they can go into next level of approval, and you can have the entire change history of what record was updated, what was the old value, what is the new value, which user changed that within this form as well, the Excel interface. The mass extension allows to extend single item to multiple hierarchies in one go, or multiple items to a single hierarchy, or multiple items to multiple hierarchies, all through the Excel interface. So this can be where you want to extend multiple spare parts to a new plant. You can select those items, export them into Excel Connect, select what template you want to make use of, and the template populates with those set of data. You can enter records like purchase a new plant, what is the new plant value, and sync it back to the approval and finally into the ERP system. This is the extended item for multiple plants. Now, the third scenario is the mass change, where we can look at filtering set of spare parts based upon what equipment they are assigned to. So all that can happen through the advanced search functionality of MDO. You can choose, this is the particular equipment that I want to update all this, and you can export that into a different template here, in this case, which can be the MRO change template, and you can change those items, and the same concept applies for that. Right, so I also want to quickly cover on how we are setting up all of these components that we talked about, both the active and passive governance in MDO. So this is a quick flavor of how we have set up MDO. So all of our customers using MDO, either for material maintenance or any other master maintenance, there's no change of code. It's all through configuration, which can be managed by business people. If we have predefined set of fields, and if new fields need to be added to the MDO metadata, there are predefined type of fields that they can choose from. If it's a drop-down kind of field, in this case, you can put with what structure and what field length, what is the character type required for it. Since the control is at the field level in MDO, we also define whether this will be a search list field, whether it's be a workflow reference field, a transient field which should not get copied when we are copying from one reference source to another, or a completeness type of field. So this completeness field gives us a profile about our record, whether it's 70, 80% complete based upon whether this field value has been filled up or not. Now we add the values to this dropdown, and then when it comes to adding this field into the layout, this is a simple drag and drop in MDO. We select what layout we want to add this field to, and drag that field from the list of fields available, play around with in terms of the position, and put it as a mandatory, non-mandatory, read-only field. The whole characteristics of that field can be managed here. Now what we ultimately do is we assign that to a particular role and to a particular event. Why a role and event? Because same role can have different layout for different events, like create and change might have a different form. All right, so I'll also quickly cover on how we are setting up the passive governance rules, which is the whole schema rule engine. So you can add a business rules, which can be a dependency or a duplicate check kind of a field or a user defined rule. You can have a combination of multiple different rules in one schema. So schema is a set of business rules. Say whether it's a completeness field or a accuracy field, a validity field rule. And then we define a weightage. So the score that we saw on the data quality score for a master record is based upon whether they are passing, how they are doing against these different business rules. Depending upon the weightage, they get a score of whether they have passed it, like a 70% or 80%, like that. But these schemas can keep running in the background, both for all the records coming in from the active governance side or the records that we upload from other systems or a direct upload into MDO. Now we can have dependency and notification section within MDO. If you want to notify people about a particular event, for example, when a record gets successfully integrated, we want to notify all the people within that workflow that this record is now gone in successfully into the ERP system. Now, the other section from a spare part perspective that is important to know and understand how we maintain that is the whole noun modifier content dictionary. So here in this example, we are selecting a particular noun. What are the attribute values which in SPSC this is assigned to, and you can add more characteristics values to it, or add a value to a characteristic type, which is an attribute here. This can be a simple addition in terms of what goes into the code, like a abbreviation, what goes into the short value, what goes into the long value, which one will have a UOM. And you can also configure dependencies within that. So these dependencies are rules like, if, for example, my item type is selected a particular value, how should my manufacturer and manufacturer number field behave? So we define this dependency and we then do the value mapping, saying that if the value is selected, let's say an OEM, then my manufacturer and part number fields should get mandatory. That way. So the entire set of information can be maintained through that. And lastly, what we are looking at is how we set up the whole workflow within MDO. Different workflows can be set up for different events like creation, extension, change. And then for each of these objects, we can have a separate set of approvers, which can be both at either as a approved by user or approved by a role. So if it's approved by a role, it can go to the next step through this, whether it's an activity step or a determination step. So determination can take it up from a value that has been put in the form. It's more like a dynamically updated workflow in MDO. You can have the entire information about the SLARs, also what is the frequency of reminders to be set in. And when should the rejection, which is the correction form, should take my request back to the first user, or whether it should go back to the previous step of the workflow that can be set up here. All right, we can activate this workflow. So I'll probably take a pause here. I know there are a few questions that are coming in. I want to address them as well. So this first question that has come in, which is more around the deployment model. So John, On the deployment model here, with MDO is available both on premise and on cloud. And on cloud, partnered with AWS there. MDO also can be available on the SCP cloud. Yeah, so basically it's available on both the models there. Then you see a question from Jennifer on okay, so this is whether Material Master standalone can be set up, or we need. Okay, yes. So there is MDO, of course, can be used as a standalone object depending upon what masters you want to maintain through MDO in the active governance mode. Of course, in our example here, we were showing that we had vendors and the equipment master also maintained through MDO for certain quick assignment of spare parts into different pieces in the ERP system. So yeah, it is recommended that we have them maintained as well from MDO. But if you want to use a particular master standalone, then we can use it there. We also have a question from Bill. How many records do we support with MaxLoads and OneGo? Yeah, that's so this is a thing that how many would not impact the performance in any way. There's actually no limitation on how many technically you can maintain there, but what our QA has recommended that in one sheet we should have around 20,000 items as mass processing records in OneGo when it comes to Material Master, because they'll have more set of data. All right, so just checking with my team here, do we have any other questions showing up on that list? Feel free to put in more questions there, and if not on this session, if you want to connect with us post this, there's some more information about us. You can visit to our website, write to us on sales@prospecta.com. You can also look at our YouTube channel, search by Master Data Online there. You can get a lot of this information about MDO, and not just about spare part, but all the other components or masters where MDO can be used for. All right, we have another question coming in on, if I get it right, Sandeep has put up, ask multiple bombs through, okay, so if I get it right, so if this is about if we have a spare part to be used in multiple different equipments, can that be assigned through MDO? Yes, of course, when we are creating that equipment, we can select one or more than one spare part, which will update the bill of material of that equipment that integrates into the ERP. Now, what we also keep doing is we keep having these webinars. So we will be coming up with the whole series of webinar. If this was more focused on the spare part side, the next we will be conducting one on the finished goods, so MDO can help on that aspect. Then you can also look at our help portal, which is help.master data online, for a quick reference of how things can be set up. And also, while just coming back on that deployment model, so MDO is a low-code application, doesn't require any code change when it comes to setting it up, and also we are enabling the business to manage the application end-to-end, which means that they will have access to what we call the MDO Academy. They can have self-learning tutorials, go through each of these components, which we have given an overview about, get themselves certified and trained on managing the application, and keep doing that for their business. Put it this way. All right, so just curious if we have any other questions for our session. I think we are pretty much well in time on that. can still wait for if anybody has any other questions coming in. No worries. So as I said, feel free to write to us, get connected with us. We will be happy to have a one-on-one discussion on any issues that you have with your spare parts and take that discussion forward. Once again, appreciate and thank everybody to find time over the last day of the week on this session. I'm hopeful this was helpful in understanding what MDO can offer for your businesses. Thank you once again, and have a nice day ahead of you. Thank you. Take care.